How could the NBA in-season tournament actually help teams and players prepare for the NBA playoffs? I speak about this with ESPN analyst and former NBA player JJ Redick in this episode of Iggy Sports Talk.
Hold up. Wait until the whole team show up. Yeah. I'm in Neverland.
Welcome back into Iggy Sports Talk. I am your host, Jake Nizuski, or Iggy for short. I want to thank you so much for tuning into this episode. Today, we're going to be talking about the new NBA in-season tournament. And later on with JJ Redick to get his thoughts on about how he thinks it'll be able to help players and teams ultimately prepare for the NBA playoffs and the environment that comes with that. But before we get into my conversation with JJ, I just wanted to give a little bit of a synopsis on what is this NBA in-season tournament. And you may be listening to this thinking, what is this? I've never heard of this. Well, it came out earlier last year, sort of from Adam Silver, trying to add more excitement to the NBA season and more ways for fans to engage. And it's sort of like March Madness. It's a tournament style, but it's all in season. And the games will count towards the regular season record of each team. And all 30 teams will participate. There will be a first round of the tournament. There will be 8 teams that will ultimately advance to the second and final stage. And then there will be single elimination in knockout rounds. And there will be sort of tournament nights. Those will be on Tuesdays and Fridays. And those will essentially go from November 3rd to November 28th. And then there will actually be, as there is with most tournaments, there's going to be a winner at the end. There's going to be a champion that will be given a new trophy called the NBA Cup. There will also be prize pool money that will be allocated towards players on teams that qualify for the knockout rounds. And there will also be named a most valuable player of the in-season tournament and an all-tournament team as well. So very excited to see what comes with all this. They've already dropped the mock-ups of the different courts that they'll specifically have for these tournament nights. And I got to tell you, these look really cool. I'm really excited to sort of see what more excitement this in-season tournament brings and really what will come out of it. And I think this will be year one of something that, they plan to do for years to come. And, one thing that, I'll mention that I'm trying to have as a fan, this type of mindset of that there's going to be some growing pains. There's going to be some things that, may happen in this in-season tournament that are unexpected or that may make people upset and ultimately think, we got to get rid of this. But there's going to be growing pains with every new thing. But I think ultimately this would be a great way to not only bring more excitement throughout the NBA season, but also an added incentive to stay locked in. Because I feel like most times, through the first month or so, people are super locked into the NBA who are, diehard fans and new fans. And then, once we get in the middle of the season, we start to see those new fans sort of trickle out and the diehards stay in watching the games each and every single night. So curious to sort of watch and see, how the strategy of teams and how they go about it, benching players, starting players, and really how this ultimately helps fans and also and how this ultimately will help players and teams prepare for an NBA playoffs type environment. And that's one thing that immediately came to mind when I first saw this come out, especially with the championship round, is there's so many players on teams, like the Magic or some of those lower tier teams that haven't made the playoffs in a while, who haven't really had the opportunity to experience the bright lights of the NBA playoffs. And most college players get to play in March Madness and everything like that, and the intensity of that. But I feel like the NBA playoffs is so different. The coverage of it, the expectation of it, the pressure of it is very different. And especially for some young players or some rookies who are looking to sort of get that feeling of the competitiveness, of the excitement that they would feel in an NBA playoff environment. In my opinion, I think that they're going to get this with the in-season tournament. And I spoke about this with JJ Redick on his thoughts on how, teams and players will really be able to get that type of intensity and excitement feeling with these games. And without further ado, let's listen to his answer.
You brought up the intensity aspect of the in-season tournament, the excitement. Curious for some players, whether they're rookies or whether they've been in the league for a little bit, who haven't had the experience in the NBA playoffs, how you think that this could be a good preparation to get mentally prepared for those high-pressure moments like that.
It's a good question. Truthfully, every player is a little bit different. And it's actually hard to generalize about guys with experience, guys without experience. Everybody's wired a little different, man. Everybody's wired a little different. And I'll repeat kind of my first answer in respect to the first, 4 weeks, whatever, of these games. These games are, they count towards the regular season. And so I think in some ways it'll be like a mini sort of preparation session for potential playing games, the last month of the season. Again, you go through an NBA season enough times and you get a sense of the cycles of the season. And in some ways, this next month will sort of replicate, I think, what March and April look like for a lot of teams that are battling for that 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 spot to try to either secure a playoff berth or secure a spot in the play-in round. So I think there's that component to it. But then there's also the Vegas component, which, again, I think is a good representation of what a play-in game looks like, what a playoff game looks like, where you're playing for a trophy, you're playing for a prize. I think there's certainly enough guys across the league that have an incredible amount of pride. I was asked this earlier today. I was doing something this morning, some production stuff this morning. I was asked a similar question about this morning. And I said, I was like, whoever ends up winning the in-season tournament is probably the team with the most amount of sickos on their team. Like, I mean that, like, you don't need to give Chris Paul a reason to be competitive. He wakes up that way. And I think I go back to the bubble, and there were a lot of teams that, not necessarily teams, but there were a lot of players that there's enough going on in the world that they didn't necessarily want to be there, right? Guys have talked about that. But then I watched the Miami Heat walk in every day. I watched the Memphis Grizzlies walk in every day. I watched the Phoenix Suns walk in every day. I watched LeBron and the Lakers walk, and there's a purpose to it. And some teams and some players are just wired that way. There's a purpose to everything they do. And the NBA weeds out the non-competitive people very quickly. And I think this is another opportunity for the competitive people to rise to the top.
I hope that you found JJ's insight very interesting and helps you take a little bit of a different perspective on this in-season tournament and what it could really mean for some of those teams and players who haven't had that NBA playoff experience. And one thing I really try to do with this podcast each and every single episode is try and give you that different perspective on different sporting events or big news topics that are happening in sports. One thing that, I love about getting the opportunity to do this is not only, give you a different perspective, but also find a way to add a deeper lens into these different topics. And so the mental aspect that players have to get into with these different playoff games or high pressure situations, I think is really interesting to hear people like JJ Redick talk about it and others talk about it on how they have experienced things like this, and especially touch on the mental side, because that's one thing that I don't think is talked about nearly enough, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I love doing this podcast, and a big reason why I even do it. If I'm able to make an impact on how people view sports in a different lens and think more about the human aspect rather than the numbers that guys are producing on an everyday level and the surface level aspects, I think it livens up the sporting events a lot more and helps you see sort of what these players are experiencing from their eyes and gives you a better perspective as a fan. So I hope this did that for you in this episode. And if you want to hear more episodes just like this one, I post Iggy Sports Talk bi-weekly over on YouTube or whatever audio platform that you listen to. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it over there. You can also follow Iggy Sports Talk over on Instagram. It's at Iggy Sports Talk. I post clips and updates regarding the podcast over there. But I really appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you're as excited as I am to see sort of how this whole in-season tournament plays out and sort of the excitement and all the great things that we love about sports can come out of this. But as always, I hope that you have a great rest of your day. I'll see you and talk to you next time. Peace.